Every single day, whether we realize it or not, we make choices. Some are small and barely noticeable, while others quietly shape the direction of our entire lives. What economics teaches us is that every choice carries a hidden cost, because the moment you choose one option, you automatically give up another. Imagine choosing between spending your evening studying for an exam or relaxing with your favorite food in a movie. The decision might seem simple, but the real cost is the opportunity you give up. Economists have a special name for this hidden cost. They call it opportunity cost, and understanding it is one of the most powerful ways to think about decisions. Opportunity cost reminds us that our resources are limited. Time, money, and energy cannot be spent in two places at once. Scarcity is the reason opportunity cost exists. Because we do not have unlimited resources, every decision forces us to choose where those resources will go. This simple reality of scarcity is what gives rise to the entire field of economics. It is the study of how people decide to allocate limited resources in a world full of unlimited. Human desires rarely have a natural stopping point. We constantly imagine better homes, faster technology, and more comfortable lives. Because resources are limited, people must constantly weigh what they want against what they can actually afford. When millions of people begin making these choices at the same time, something remarkable happens. Markets begin to form. Markets are not just physical places. They are systems where buyers and sellers interact, helping determine prices and allocate resources. Prices are signals. They quietly communicate information about scarcity, demand, and value. When prices rise, producers often respond by increasing production, hoping to benefit from the higher value of their goods. At the same time, higher prices may cause some buyers to step back and reconsider whether the product is worth the cost. The balance between supply and demand is what eventually leads markets toward an equilibrium price. Trade allows people to specialize and focus on what they do best while relying on others for the rest. Specialization increases productivity because individuals and businesses can concentrate on the tasks they perform most efficiently. This same principle applies on a global scale when countries trade with each other. International trade allows countries to focus on industries where they have an advantage. Comparative advantage explains why cooperation through trade can benefit both sides even when one side is more efficient at everything. By focusing on relative strengths, societies can produce more overall wealth. Over time, productive economies generate rising income and improved standards of living. Economic growth often leads to improvements in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Of course, real economies are far more complicated than simple diagrams. Money flows through the economy in cycles connecting households, businesses, and governments. Governments also play a role by collecting taxes and providing services. Public spending helps fund infrastructure, education, and other services that support economic activity. Economists often debate how much involvement governments should have in markets. Managing an economy can sometimes feel like balancing several spinning plates at the same time. Yet at its core, economics is simply the story of choices, incentives, and the ways people work together to make the most of limited resources. When individuals specialize in different skills and exchange the results of their work, societies become far more productive than if everyone tried to do everything alone. Even if one person is better at producing everything, cooperation can still make both sides better off when each focuses on the activity with the lowest opportunity cost. Comparative advantage explains why specialization and trade create value, even when one side appears more capable in absolute terms. By focusing on what they do relatively best, both sides increase total output and improve their own well-being. This same logic applies across borders, which is why international trade connects economies around the world. Trade allows countries to access products that would be more expensive or difficult to produce on their own. Markets coordinate the decisions of millions of buyers and sellers without requiring a central planner. Prices adjust as signals, reflecting changes in supply and demand. Producers respond to these signals by adjusting how much they produce. Consumers also respond to price changes by reconsidering how much they are willing to buy. The point where supply and demand meet is known as equilibrium, where the quantity buyers want equals the quantity sellers are willing to produce. At equilibrium, markets operate smoothly with neither large shortages nor large surpluses. Higher prices encourage producers to expand output because producing more becomes more profitable. Lower prices, on the other hand, often signal producers to reduce output. Sometimes prices rise so high that buyers simply decide the product is not worth it. Economists also study situations where markets produce side effects that affect people who are not directly involved in the transaction. These effects are known as externalities, and they can be either harmful or beneficial. In cases like pollution, governments sometimes intervene to reduce negative externalities. Policies can also encourage activities that create positive benefits for society. Education is often considered a positive externality because its benefits extend far beyond the individual student. Healthcare improvements can also create benefits that ripple throughout the entire economy. All of these interactions combine to form a continuous flow of money, goods, and services. Workers provide labor to businesses and receive wages, which they later spend on goods and services. Governments collect taxes in order to fund public services.
Those funds are then used to build infrastructure and support essential services.
Economists continue to debate the right balance between free markets and government involvement. And sometimes the data can become so complex that even economists need a moment to step back and rethink their models. But despite the complexity, the basic principles remain surprisingly simple. Scarcity forces choices, choices create incentives, and incentives shape the behavior of individuals and institutions. Together, these decisions form the invisible system that drives every modern economy. Money acts as a lubricant for trade, allowing people to exchange value without bartering awkwardly with goats or other goods. It serves as a medium of exchange, simplifying transactions and enabling specialization. Money also acts as a unit of account, so we can measure and compare the value of different goods and services. Additionally, money functions as a store of value, allowing people to save today for purchases in the future. Banks take deposits from savers and lend them to others, charging interest, which is the cost of borrowing. Loans create new money in the economy, allowing people to invest in homes, cars, or businesses without holding all the cash physically. This fractional reserve banking system expands the money supply, keeping the economy fluid. Governments collect taxes from households and businesses to fund public goods like roads, schools, and healthcare. These expenditures enable society to function efficiently, providing services that markets alone might underproduce. When governments spend more than they collect, they run a budget deficit, which can be financed by borrowing. Selling government bonds allows citizens and investors to lend money to the state, earning interest in return. Accumulated deficits over time create national debt, which countries manage carefully to maintain economic stability. Debt isn't inherently bad if used for productive investment like infrastructure, education, or healthcare, but misuse can harm the economy. When borrowed funds create real productive assets, debt can support long-term growth. High interest costs on existing debt can limit future spending and even become a significant budget item themselves. International trade allows countries to specialize in goods where they have a comparative advantage, benefiting both sides. Even if one country is less productive overall, trade still increases efficiency and consumption possibilities. Global supply chains coordinate production and delivery across vast distances, connecting resources, factories, and consumers.
Disruptions in logistics can have widespread effects, showing how fragile global trade can be.
Specialized components, like semiconductors, are concentrated in few locations, which can create supply shocks affecting entire industries.
Labor markets determine how workers are matched with jobs, where wages reflect the value of their contributions.
Labor supply depends not only on wages but also on individual preferences for leisure and other factors. When wages rise, firms may invest in automation to maintain profitability, sometimes displacing workers. Wage gaps arise due to differences in skills, experience, bargaining power, and market conditions.
Savings can be converted into investment, which drives economic growth and capital accumulation.
Financial markets connect those with money to invest with those who need capital, balancing risk and reward.
Gross domestic product measures the total value of final goods and services produced in a country, indicating economic activity. It helps track whether an economy is growing or shrinking and is useful for comparing performance across countries. GDP can be calculated using production, income, or expenditure approaches, each providing a different perspective on the economy. Consumption, labeled as C in GDP, represents all spending by households on goods and services, forming the largest part of economic activity. Investment, labeled as I, reflects business spending on capital goods and construction, fueling future production capacity. Hyperinflation is an extreme form of inflation, where prices rise so quickly that money loses value almost immediately. Excessive money creation without corresponding increases in goods causes prices to spike, diminishing real wealth. Central banks manage monetary policy by controlling the money supply and setting interest rates to stabilize the economy.
Interest rates influence borrowing and lending, affecting investment, consumption, and overall economic activity.
Quantitative easing involves central banks buying financial assets to inject liquidity into the economy, stimulating spending and investment.
Deposit insurance protects savers and prevents bank runs, maintaining confidence in the financial system.
Taxes fund government services and infrastructure, redistributing resources and supporting public welfare. Various types of taxes are used to collect revenue fairly, each targeting specific sources of income or consumption. A budget deficit occurs when government spending exceeds revenue, while a surplus occurs when revenue exceeds spending. Government borrowing through bonds allows funding of deficits without immediate tax increases. Economic growth can come from higher capital, improved technology, and greater labor productivity, but growth must be sustainable and not deplete resources. Not all growth is positive. Environmental degradation or resource depletion can create technically high GDP but poor quality of life. Economies naturally experience cycles of expansion and contraction, with booms, recessions, and sometimes depressions. Aggregate demand is the total demand for goods and services, while aggregate supply represents total output capacity in the economy.
When demand outpaces supply, prices increase, leading to inflation. If supply falls while demand remains high, inflation worsens.
Stagflation combines slow growth, high unemployment, and rising prices, creating a challenging economic environment.
Supply shocks, rising demand, or price discrimination can explain why goods, like avocado toast, cost more than expected. Money acts as a medium of exchange, simplifying trade and avoiding barter, allowing us to buy goods and services efficiently. Money also serves as a store of value, letting people save today to spend in the future, preserving purchasing power.
Modern money exists digitally, allowing seamless transactions and expanding the reach of trade beyond physical currency.
Banks intermediate between savers and borrowers, providing capital to fund investment and economic growth. Fractional reserve banking allows banks to lend most of their deposits while keeping a fraction in reserve, effectively creating new money in the economy. Bank runs occur when too many depositors demand cash at once, threatening financial stability, which deposit insurance helps prevent. Taxes fund public goods and services, ensuring society functions smoothly and equitably.
Different taxes target various sources of revenue, balancing fairness and efficiency in funding government activities.
A budget deficit occurs when spending exceeds revenue, while a surplus occurs when revenue exceeds spending. Governments borrow by issuing bonds, allowing them to finance deficits and fund essential projects without immediate tax hikes. Sustainable growth relies on careful investment in capital, technology, and labor productivity, ensuring future prosperity. Growth that depletes natural resources or harms the environment can increase GDP but reduces long-term well-being. Economic activity naturally fluctuates through cycles of expansion, contraction, booms, and recessions.
Aggregate demand represents total spending in the economy, while aggregate supply shows total production capacity, both affecting prices and output.
When demand exceeds supply or production costs rise, prices increase, leading to inflation and changes in consumer behavior.
Stagflation occurs when economic growth slows, unemployment rises, and prices increase simultaneously, creating complex challenges.
Supply chains connect production to consumers, showing how goods move from raw materials to final products in the economy. Factors of production like land, labor, and capital combine through supply chains to create finished goods efficiently. Productivity measures how much output is produced per unit of input, determining efficiency and the capacity to grow the economy. Technological improvements and skill development enhance productivity, allowing more goods and services to be produced with the same resources. Price fluctuations result from supply shocks, demand changes, or intentional pricing strategies, illustrating market responses. Money facilitates trade, serving as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. Keeping markets running smoothly, central banks use monetary policy, including interest rate adjustments and asset purchases, to stabilize the economy and manage inflation.
Banks channel funds from savers to borrowers, encouraging investment, production, and economic activity.
Deposit insurance ensures savers' money is protected, preventing bank runs and maintaining trust in the financial system.
Taxes finance public goods and services, supporting society's infrastructure and welfare. Budget management ensures governments can fund programs responsibly, borrowing if necessary but aiming for sustainability. Government borrowing via bonds provides funds for spending without immediate tax increases, with repayment and interest obligations in the future. Investment in capital, technology, and labor productivity drives sustainable economic growth over time. Growth that harms the environment may boost GDP temporarily but undermines long-term well-being, highlighting the importance of sustainable practices.